And I guess that's related to this term that you and Jonathan Haidt termed safetyism, right? This
Yeah.
where I guess that leads to, right, kind of this inclination to protect what's yours and not infiltrate what's yours with what's on the outside. And in that book, The Coddling of the American Mind, you had discussed these three untruths, right? Can you
Mhm.
tell me a bit about those? It's so important to the arguments here.
Sure. Yeah. So coddling came out of me getting suicidally depressed in 2007. And it was, and to be clear, part of it was just the pure exhaustion of being in the culture war all the time. You know, people love you when you're when you're supporting someone they like's opinion, but as soon as you defend the same principle for someone they don't like, it can be, if you don't have like the right group of friends, you know, it can be really exhausting because they'll hate your guts on the very next case, even if from a principled standpoint, it's exactly the same. So I got very depressed. It's one of the reasons why I don't live in Philadelphia, as I also, you know, it's not really my town. And while I was recovering from this, you know, the worst depression I ever had in my life, I was studying cognitive behavioral therapy and the practice of CBT. And you can know this stuff intellectually, but it doesn't do you a bit of good unless you actually sit down with your own thoughts, you know, a couple times a day and try to get in the habit of talking down your own thoughts, which basically means kind of like everybody has what are called cognitive distortions. Those are sort of mental exaggerations that tell you you're fragile, that you're in greater danger than you are, that people hate your guts, that everything's going to work out poorly. Everyone does these to a degree, but CBT recognize that people who are depressed and anxious do this far more often. But if you can intercede, not through the power of positive thinking, but through developing the habits of going, wait a second, that's catastrophizing. That thought right there is catastrophizing. This thought's mind reading. This thought's fortune telling. You can kind of talk yourself down. And I'm literally living proof because, you know, I really, if you told me in 2007 I'd still be alive today, I probably would have laughed at you because I just assumed eventually I was going to kill myself. And I'm night and day different now. And I also got help from medications. So like people who are depressed, to be clear, I'm not saying I just white knuckled this, but CBT really made a long-term difference to the way my happiness worked. And while I was studying this, I was still working on free speech on campus. And I was looking at what was going on campus and looking at the way administrators were constantly sort of exaggerating threats and assuming that students couldn't actually handle opinions that hurt their feelings and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it almost seems like adults are saying, do catastrophize, do engage in emotional reasoning, do engage in all of these cognitive distortions. But at the time, I said, thank goodness it doesn't look like the students themselves are listening. And then suddenly, right around 2013, going into 2014, you started seeing students showing up on campus who, when they would talk about freedom of speech, were talking about it in a medicalized way, that not this speaker should be banned from campus because I don't like the speaker and I think the speaker's a bigot, saying, I don't think the speaker should come to campus because it will be literally psychologically harmful, usually to someone else on campus, and that will do permanent damage because everyone can be easily harmed by words. And I was like, oh, wow. So this thing that I've been afraid we're teaching a young generation, it seems like this is getting through finally to the people who started showing up on campus around 2013, 2014. So Haidt and I got together. Jonathan Haidt and I had just become friends because we actually share a similar kind of position in the culture war, where we're constantly trying to, you know, referee to a degree, being like, you know, get the right and left to actually talk to each other. And we came up with an article in 2015 saying these same things that led to this uptick in censorship on campus that was really noticeable in 2014, 2015 are the same things that could actually are the same kind of mental habits that will make people anxious and depressed. So it got really, you know, the article, you know, was very well received at the time. And then we fixed the whole problem. just kidding. And things got much worse. And so, we were originally proud of the original article, and we weren't planning to write a book. But then, because things got worse, we decided to get together to write a book. By the way, I've always hated the title "Coddling of the American Mind." I opposed it both for the original article and for the book. I wanted to call it Disempowered, because what I feel like what we're really doing is we're telling students that they are weaker and more fragile than they actually are, and that's disempowering. So in the book, we framed it as if we were giving a generation of young people the worst possible advice, both from a wisdom tradition standpoint and from a modern psychological standpoint. And so we set it up in the beginning as if like an idiotic guru is telling us, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Always trust your feelings, and life is a battle between good people and evil people. And in the setup, we're kind of like, that's awful advice. And then we kind of turn around to the audience and go, so why are we telling young people this? And of course, we're not saying we're explicitly telling young people this, but I feel like we're implicitly telling them that they are fragile, that emotional discomfort is something that must immediately be addressed through outside interventions, as opposed to things like CBT, where you actually, just like all humans have faced throughout, as long as we've existed, things that upset or discomfort us. That's one of the reasons why Stoicism, Buddhism, all of these wisdom traditions have different techniques for talking yourself down. Nobody tells you, worry more, be more panicked. But it seems like that's what we've been doing as a society. And of course, the last one, life is a battle between good people and evil people. That's something that I felt like I spent most of my life watching people get somewhat more sophisticated about the fact that, like, even that person I hate, there are things we agree on, or we're both equally human, and that actually, everybody has both good and evil within them. So suddenly getting back to this much more, although actually like much more almost religious kind of idea of everything is just a battle between good people and evil people politically, and you see this on the left and the right as well. So we wrote this book in 2018, and we fixed it all. Sorry, I'm making that joke again. Everything got much worse even after 2018. So that's one of the reasons why I'm working on a book called Canceling of the American Mind, which is more about the huge, and I mean huge, increase of professors in particular, but also students I'm seeing getting fired, getting punished, getting expelled, since all of this stuff really started to accelerate around 2016, 2017.